5 minutes before the prison gates clanged shut behind me, a marsh-gray sky cracked open and poured down a rain so cold it felt like memory itself was trying to rinse me clean. I almost laughed at the symbolism. 25 years avoiding eye contact with the past, and now the universe wanted me spotless for the one man who had stained every chapter of my life without ever appearing in it. My father. The man I last saw through a crib railing. The name classmates used as a punchline. The myth Mom never corrected, because myths hurt less than paperwork stamped death row. I pressed my forehead against the window of the state van, tracking raindrops as they streaked sideways like prison bars. Somewhere beyond that fog I pictured a chamber the color of dull pennies, a bunk welded to concrete, a meal tray shoved through a slot, and sitting there, rehearsing an apology or maybe a last request, was a stranger whose DNA runs in my veins like an unwelcome anthem. The warden said we'd get 2 hours. 2 hours to greet, forgive, grieve, and leave. 2 hours to decide whether half of me deserved the needle scheduled for next Friday at 9 p.m. sharp. My palms wouldn't stop sweating, so I gripped my backpack straps harder, the nylon biting circles into my thumbs. Outside, the guard tower spotlight sliced through the rain, and in that beam I saw a boy version of me, 15, furious, promising never to give this man a single tear. I whispered to that ghost, "Watch me now." Then the van door slid open and the countdown began. I handed my phone, wallet, and the paperback I brought for the ride back to a correctional officer built like concrete. His badge glinted. Corporal Agnew. He patted down my jacket, tapped the tiny velvet box I'd smuggled in my inner pocket, and raised an eyebrow. "It's a rosary," I said. "One of those finger loop kinds." Chaplain cleared it. He nodded, expression softening, and waved me through the metal detector. The hallway smelled of bleach and unspilled secrets. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like bored hornets. Every 9 feet a door thunked shut behind me, each heavier than the last, until the air itself felt padlocked. Finally we reached a room small enough to make a confession booth jealous. Plexiglass divider, telephone receiver on each side, 2 bolted chairs. No cameras. "He'll be brought in shortly," Agnew said, voice lower now. "Call the guard if you need to end early." I thanked him, sat, and pulled the rosary out, letting its single decade spin between my fingers. I'd never been religious, but Mom prayed it nightly for a man she claimed no longer existed. Today I wanted to place it in his palm. Proof that even after a quarter-century of silence, someone still believed forgiveness negotiates with impossible odds. The inner door opened and time lurched. The prisoner who stepped in was thinner than any memory I might have faked. A long face bracketed by premature gray stubble, cheekbones carving shadows, hands trembling just enough to make the shackles clink. His orange jumpsuit looked blisteringly bright against the institutional beige walls, as if color itself was protesting its assignment. He blinked, unsure, until the CO guided him forward, detached the waist chain from his cuffs, and left. We were alone, 2 statues divided by an inch of bulletproof transparency. For 5 full seconds we stared. His eyes, hazel like mine, scanned every cell of my face, recording details before the state erased them for good. I lifted the phone, surprised to find oxygen in my lungs, and spoke first because silence felt like cowardice. "Hi, Dad." He let out a half-laugh that collapsed into a cough. Raising the receiver, he answered, "You calling me that is the last miracle I expected." I swallowed. "I don't believe in miracles. I believe in paperwork." Another cough laugh. "So you got my letters. All 92 of them. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Mom kept them sealed until last month. Did you read them?" "I read 3. "Which 3? "Your first. Your 5th. And the one you wrote the day they scheduled your execution." He winced, eyes dropping to his chained hands. I hoped the dates lined up with something useful. They lined up with anger, confusion, and insomnia. He looked back up. "I deserve worse." I unclenched the rosary loop, feeling the wooden bead leave a crescent dent in my palm. Before we bargain about what you deserve, I need to know why you asked for me now. 25 years you've had chaplains, jailhouse journalists, even crime podcast hosts knocking on your door. They all got slots on your visitation list. I never did. He drew a breath so ragged it rattled the plexiglass, as if the room itself were rationing oxygen. Because back then, he said, voice thin as worn tape, I believed dying alone was justice. I'd killed. His Adam's apple jumped hard. I'd killed any right I had to fatherhood, to last words, to a son's forgiveness. His cuffed hands trembled on the metal shelf, chains chiming like a broken metronome. But the closer that date gets, the louder this thought screams through the cinder block. A son shouldn't inherit a mystery. You deserve to bury my ghost on your own terms, not on the state's schedule. Heat spiked behind my eyes. I almost slammed the receiver back into its cradle just to feel something crack. Instead, I steadied it against my cheek and whispered, I'm not here to bury ghosts. I'm here to confront them name by name, crime by crime. If you want mercy, earn it with the truth. He nodded, then croaked, Ask. So I asked harder, faster, fiercer than I'd rehearsed beneath the buzzing motel fluorescent. 47 questions became 50, then 60, ricocheting off the plexiglass like ballistics I'd fired straight from the dark corner of my childhood. Did you really shoot the clerk first, or was the partner's gun a decoy? Why did you bring a 19-year-old with a baby on the way? Did you scope the store for days or choose it because the lights were out on 7th Street? What did the gun feel like? Hot, heavy, inevitable? Did you practice your apology in the squad car after arrest? Or did the words rot in your mouth until arraignment? What were Mom's last words to you at sentencing? Rot? Repent? Or nothing at all? Did you picture her coffin when the cancer took her? Or did you erase the scene to save yourself? And when my 4th grade teacher asked us to draw our families, did your name burn behind my crayons? Did you ever once pray that I'd forget you? Or did you want me to keep the wound open so you'd still be inside something living? Did you love her? Did you ever learn how to love me? To each interrogation he paid the costliest denomination imaginable. Excruciating detail. He walked me through every petty heist that sharpened his appetite for the big score, describing how adrenaline coated his tongue with the taste of pennies and static. He recalled the muzzle flash that turned a living clerk into courtroom evidence, admitting that in the split second after the trigger pull, he felt a clarity bright enough to blind me for decades. He relived the visiting room night when my mother pressed a divorce packet against the glass, mascara sluicing down her cheeks, and how he signed each page without reading because the shame already knew where to initial. Then he confessed the single most cowardly sentence he ever gave her. Tell the boy his dad died in Iraq. Heroes are easier to mourn. And the way her shoulders caved as if language itself had struck her. My pulse pounded like the warden's execution clock crawling toward zeros, but I forced more questions, desperate to catalog every jagged edge so my imagination would stop forging newer, sharper ones in the dark. At last I asked whether remorse kept him awake or if decades had numbed even that. His reply didn't rise above a rasp, yet it shattered the barrier more cleanly than any contraband hammer. Remorse sleeps in my bunk. Regret steals the pillow. There isn't an inch of mattress left for rest. I gave it all to the ghosts. We sat there, breaths fogging the barrier, until he wiped tears with cuffed knuckles. Your turn, he rasped. For what? To speak. You've only interrogated. I wanted to argue that interrogation counted as conversation, that volleying questions across bulletproof glass was the only dialect we'd ever share, but even the thought of debating definitions felt heavy. So I exhaled and unpacked the freight he'd never seen. I told him how every time a police cruiser idled outside our elementary school for a safety assembly, the teacher's face flickered, first concern, then calculation, then pity, as if she were bracing for me to bolt. I told him about Father's Day in 3rd grade, when Mrs. Castillo laid out construction paper neckties, and I faked a stomachache to avoid gluing a paper knot for a man in a mug shot. I recounted sophomore year. How I skipped prom because tuck shop mirrors seemed designed to reflect the absence of paternal hands adjusting my collar. I painted the scene at Mom's graveside service. The pastor's hushed homily on grace, the way parishioners spoke around your name, the way hikers skirt a sinkhole, the casserole still warm in the fellowship hall that nobody ate because shame spoils appetite. I described my double life at community college. Daylight lectures on psychology, midnight shifts pushing a janitor's cart under buzzing stadium lights so tuition invoices wouldn't cannibalize the rent. I admitted how group therapy felt like shouting into a canyon. Echo, echo, but no father's voice answering back. I confessed the panic attacks triggered by evening news crawls, how a single Red Sheeran reading gunman could splinter my composure, sending my girlfriend searching for exits because loud noises and louder memories had turned me into a human alarm system. I explained that eventually she packed up her plants and her patience, leaving a note that said, "I love you, but the past keeps sleeping in our bed." He absorbed it all the way, the condemned prey, motionless except for the rise and fall of breath, eyes fixed, every syllable treated like scripture in a gospel he'd never read. No fidgeting, no rebuttal, just a silent inventory of the collateral damage his absence had detonated. When the words finally ran out of me, when the empty space in the room felt larger than either of us, I glanced at the institutional clock behind his head and realized our allotted 2 hours had shrunk to 12 fragile minutes. I lifted the rosary. "Mom said to give you this when I was ready." He pressed his fingers to the glass as if feeling its texture through vibration. "I'm not Catholic anymore." "Neither am I," I said. "But it's made of olive wood from Bethlehem." She thought symbolism mattered. "Everything matters when your timeline is short," he murmured. A CO rapped on the door, 5-minute warning. Dad's shoulders jerked. "Before they take me, I need you to hear something direct." I nodded, throat knotted. "The public record tells you I murdered a man." "That's true. But the public record won't tell you I plan to pull the trigger if the clerk even twitched." I walked in wanting blood. Tears streaked down his cheeks. "I need my son to know I'm not a tragic victim of circumstance. I was the architect of a nightmare." I squeezed the phone until plastic creaked. "I know. Then you can hate me in peace. But I came to see if there's room for something after hate." His eyes flickered, hope, disbelief, terror. "Is there?" "I don't know. But I see a door." The guard stepped inside. Dad leaned forward, palms flat on the glass, and mouthed, "Thank you." The shackles jingled as the CO reattached the waist chain. When Dad turned to leave, I tapped the plexiglass once. He turned back. I pressed the rosary loop against the glass so he could see it. He nodded, a gesture so gentle it collapsed the distance of 25 years into the space between two heartbeats. Then he was gone. I exited the same steel maze in reverse, each door thudding shut like punctuation on sentences nobody wants to read aloud. Outside, the rain had stopped. Damp asphalt reflected the tower lights, making the prison look like it floated on a dark mirror. Corporal Agnew led me to the van. Before I climbed in, he said, "Most visitors come once and never return." "I'll be back next Thursday," I replied. He hesitated. "That's the final day." "I know." "You sure?" I tasted iron on my tongue, the same flavor my father described. Someone has to see him cross the finish line. Might as well be the person who ran the first lap without knowing the race. The ride to my motel was silent except for windshield wipers squeaking against leftover drizzle. In my room, I laid the rosary on the nightstand and paced until sunrise, rehearsing words I'd deliver to the governor's clemency board that afternoon. The lawyer said last-minute appeals rarely work, especially when guilt is confessed. But I wasn't seeking a legal miracle. I wanted a moral record, a footnote in the archive. His son showed up. His son testified that a man can be both monster and minter in the span of 2 hours. That penitence, though late, is still currency. That lineage is a long-distance relay where the final runner sometimes decides not to drop the baton. 9 days later at 8:54 p.m., I stood in a sterile viewing room behind one-way glass. A row of witnesses, journalists, the victim's nephew, state officials, occupied their assigned seats. I clutched the rosary loop so hard its wooden beads carved half-moons into my skin. Dad was marched in, eyes scanning until they locked onto mine. I nodded once. He breathed out, shoulders unclenching. When asked for last words, he spoke into the microphone. To the family I harmed, I surrender every breath as apology. To my son, thank you for proving light exists outside these walls. The warden signaled. Curtains parted on the injection chamber. I counted each syringe to press. 1, 2, 3. His eyelids fluttered like moth wings, then settled. A medical examiner pronounced death at 9:08 p.m. I expected collapsing grief. Instead, a hush fell over my mind, as if the orchestra of rage that had scored my life finally set down its instruments. I left the prison under a sky inked deep blue, stars puncturing the darkness like exit wounds. In the parking lot, I looked up, whispered his name, and threaded the rosary onto the chain-link fence where other families tied ribbons. The knot felt final but not brutal. Back home, I boxed up the unopened letters and mailed them to a prison reform nonprofit, anonymously, so other children of the condemned might glimpse their own maps through mine. I started therapy again, this time not to cauterize anger but to irrigate what remained. Some nights I still dream of plexiglass and rain, but the nightmare ends differently. I turn the phone cradle into a mirror, see my own face, and realize the conversation was always with myself. That, ultimately, is the story I offer you. A father's death did not free me from the past. It freed me to rewrite it. Pain did not vanish. It evolved into context. And forgiveness was never a switch. It was a door that required 2 hands to push open. His and mine, separated by an inch of glass yet finally moving in the same direction.